Hi, so happy to be here. I'm Donna Chacko with Serenity and Health, and it's just a privilege for me to be here this morning with my friend Jolee Paden. Howdy, welcome.
Hi, Donna. Thanks for having me.
Did I say your name right?
You did,
Oh,
Paden.
Paden, perfect. Um, well, Jolee and I have a history, which is just fabulous. But before we go into that, let me just tell you that she's agreed to participate in this series of brief conversations I've been having. And it's just been tremendous for me. I hope for you to speak with some folks who spend a lot of time and effort working on issues related to serenity, health, and God. She comes from a very special perspective as a young person and an athlete.
Hmm.
And so, Jolee, you and I connected when you came to the early morning St. Mark's little ladies group that
Right.
was and is still meeting. It's called Caring for Body and Soul. So can you start us there? Like, I can't remember what year that was and how and tell us how you ended up there. And
Yeah. It would have been late 2016, if not early 2017, that I had a friend that was in the area, Megan. She was the one that wanted to go, and we were walking one day, and she's like, I found this group, and I said, "Can I come with you?" And so she actually ended up moving out of the area, but all of us still just kept coming on Wednesday mornings. It was right around the corner from my house, which made it really easy and convenient as well.
yes. Well, and if anybody's interested in that group, Caring for Body and Soul, it's a women's group for women who wish to journey together in trying to be healthier and closer to God. There'll be information and links to follow this video, and also things that Jolee talks about. We'll give you that information so that you can follow up on it. Okay, so go on, tell us.
Yeah, so I moved to the Washington, D.C. area in the fall of 2016. And that was actually for something running related, but in a very different vein than what I do now. And I was working in homeless services. And then in the summer of 2017, I transitioned into the organization that I work with now, which is the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, an international organization out of Kansas City, actually, but they had a chapter in Washington, D.C. And so as of January 2018, I was full time with FCA serving college coaches and athletes in
So,
primarily at George Washington University.
would you just take a moment and just say a couple sentences about that organization? Because a lot of people know of it, but some people may not.
Right. So it is primarily to influence coaches and athletes that they would encounter Christ through the power of the church and just through relationship with Jesus. And the main emphasis, though, is to and through a coach, understanding that if you impact a coach for Christ, then you are impacting athletes. I think something that I learned so much just during my time with FCA is that a coach will impact sometimes more people in one season than some people do in their entire lives. And we can probably all, if you've played sports, you can remember of things that your coach said, sometimes more so than your parents or your pastor. I had a track coach. I was a track and cross country athlete. Last one takes care of itself. That was always our motto. And even now, how as an adult, that translates into things that I think about. All right, last rep takes care of itself.
Say that again. What is the
The
expression?
last So if we were on the track, my coach would always say we did 12,000-meter repeats, and we would come to the 11th one, and he would say, all right, the last one takes care of itself. So we would just finish out the 12th. It's like you always have enough in the tank for that last one.
Hey, that's a great segue into when Jolee joined our group. She just casually mentioned, by the way, oh, I wrote a book. Wrote a book. She already had written a book. And look at this. This is the most wonderful book. It's called Spiritual Runner, a runner after God's own heart.
Hmm.
I strongly recommend it, if especially if you're a runner and you like to pray and you like the Bible and you want to be closer to God, how you can connect your running with scripture and meditation. And we'll have the information available. It's on Amazon, right?
Right. And I think I had written that book when I was in college, but it was something that God had just given me vision for, even when I was in high school. And I started to realize how much the running community actually looked more like the early church than our churches do. That I was with these people that could get up at 5 a.m. and run 10 miles, like the discipline and the endurance and the commitment and just even the community that existed. And so that's really where that book came out of, was just a sense of, wow, what if we actually pursued our faith like we pursue our athletic careers? How would our lives look different? And we're chasing rewards that are very temporary, but what if we could actually understand the delayed gratification with health that's so intertwined of we want the instant results rather than,
Yeah.
okay, I'm going to get up 10 days, do my work, it's a lot harder to see the long term.
Yeah. Well, that's a beautiful insight, the way you said that, how that all kind of evolved.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now you're at the Fellowship of Christian Athletes you have been for several years. So how was that? All of a sudden you were very young, but you were kind of collaborating with coaches, right?
Right. And I mean, our group, you really walked with me even through that time of saying, hey, I think I'm going to quit my job. I think I'm going to move into full-time ministry. And something that God has gifted me with is the ability to build and mobilize people. And so the FCA chapter, so a lot of that, I'll say a little bit more about that, of just kind of, we call it the 4 C's, but campus, coaches, camps, and community is kind of where the ministry manifests in different circles. So I was primarily doing campus ministry collegiately. So a lot of people may know FCA through middle school, high school, the summer camps that they do throughout the summer. That was my original introduction as a fifth grader to FCA in Illinois, was Power Camp, which is just free sports camp over the summer. And I served at that camp as a high schooler and as a college student. And so to be on the other side of things, to say, hey, now I'm someone that's actually going to provide this service. And so we launched a campus ministry at George Washington University where we would have a weekly meeting where there was food and games and just a space for fellowship, but there would also be a message centered in the gospel and in encouragement for these athletes. Kind of these things that I was saying about, hey, we understand these concepts of discipline and how do we actually work that out in our faith, or that our identity is not who we are as athletes, but that's something that we do. Because the reality specifically with college athletes is if you've been playing a sport since you were at least 5 years old, and all of a sudden you're playing through how old are you when you graduate college? 21, 22. So that's been your life to be a baseball player, a soccer player. And all of a sudden you wake up one day after graduation and you're no longer an athlete. Well, who am I? Where does that sense of identity come from? So that was a lot of my job is walking with coaches and then athletes to say, who are you outside of this sport that you have given your life to?
Oh, that's really fascinating. So through all of this, are you still an athlete?
It's a good question. I think that the evolution in my mind that I've gone through is I have to first know that I am a child of God that likes to run. I still would call myself a runner, but in my heart of hearts, I have to know that if I couldn't run one day, that I'm still who I am. I'm still who God made me to be. And that was something that I really walked through in college because I had some medical issues. I was not being able to perform how I wanted to. And it was a sense of, whoa, if I'm not competing, who am I? And it's been so cool to see how God has used that time in my life to say, now you get to walk through this with an athlete even look at right now. I was working with a number of teams, the Howard softball team through the spring, and their season, we say Corona was everyone in the NCAA tore their ACL at the same time, and their seasons were over the morning they woke up. So it was like God had positioned a lot of us as FCA staff to say, how can we respond to this and actually walk through the emotional heartbreak, the mental trauma that's happening to wake up and you're no longer an athlete if you're a senior. So that's been a lot of the spring, actually.
Wow. Yeah. I'm sure that was a much, much needed and appreciated service. That's things you don't think about with this crisis we're going through. The impacts are so broad and so deep.
Yes. And even yesterday, meeting with some coaches at George Washington University, we really said, now we're going to see who the true coaches are. So we're coming out with these announcements collegiately that seasons are canceled for the fall, that they're moving them to the spring. So that right now, athletes are still going to be able to practice, but not compete. So what does it look like to coach where your goal is not to win, but to really coach a heart of an athlete to prepare for what is ahead? So it's actually changing the way that I think we're going to view coaching athletes in sports in the next number of years.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. It's been quite something to watch the whole pandemic and what it has done to sports and everything else. But now you're moving beyond the Washington, D.C. metro area. So tell us how this works, please.
Yeah. Wow. So as of June 1st, I stepped into a new role that I was not looking for, but we all know that God has a sense of humor and what our expectations often are. And that is as the director of operations for Southeast Asia and FCA. So definitely not Washington, D.C. as well. I think I will always consider Washington, D.C. home because I just grew, and a lot of my church family is here, and I feel like they're sending me. And so back in December, after being in Singapore, I had connected with some of our staff in Asia and felt like God was positioning me towards Southeast Asia. And I had always had a heart to serve outside of the U.S. Through college and even afterwards, but felt very content in what I had been doing the last 3-4 years in DC. And but at the end of the day, they offered me a role to come on and help build ministry in Southeast Asia with FCA. So I will be based out of Malaysia, but serving 11 different countries across that region to essentially recruit, train, hire, and retain and encourage the staff, the FCA staff and partners that are on the ground, that are the ones that are actually working with coaches and athletes. So I'll be a little bit removed from the field that I have been in, but I understand the importance of encouraging staff because I was that staff the days where you just need someone to say, you're doing it, you're doing the right thing.
Well, there's two things about Fellowship of Christian Athletes that I don't think our listeners know. One is this international reach, which was new to me.
Yeah.
But the second is, and I think it's relevant here, and if you would mention it, as I understand, Jolee, most of the people that work for this cause are not on a straight salary, and you fundraise to support your work and your mission. And I think your situation is like that. You don't go off just knowing you're getting a check. You have to also fundraise. And we are putting those links at the end, because if this cause is something that you would like to contribute to, and now you have a face of a very, very authentic, loving young lady doing this work, it would be. But did I explain that right? How the fundraising?
Yeah, you did. I can say a little bit more. So I'll start on the international piece. So just in the last, it's been less than 5 years that FCA has really stepped in to own that we are a global organization, not just one that serves domestically. So while FCA staff in the U.S. is about 2,000 people, we have another, hundreds of partners across the world that are starting to be linked and resourced with FCA Bibles. We have specific athlete Bibles and just different resources for discipleship and training coaches. The FCA doesn't need to put their name on an organization internationally, but they're actually coming up underneath it because in a country like Indonesia, or just different, more closed countries, you're not going to wear the Fellowship of Christian Athletes cross across your chest, but that mission and vision is still there. So they kind of have different umbrellas, if you will. And so it's pretty cool. I can send you this map as well, but they've broken the US up into 14 different global regions, which then are associated with regions in other parts of the world. So how I was originally connected to Southeast Asia was the Mid-Atlantic region in the US. The sister region is Southeast Asia. So the Carolinas are aligned with India and the Middle East. So it gives FCA staff a focus of pray, give, go. They say, this is the area of the world we want you to pray for. This is where we want you to invest in. And then maybe you even go, or you host someone from that country, called a reverse go trip, where you host a missionary FCA staff from that country in your home. So that's how FCA is starting to build strategy towards partnership across the world.
I see. Excellent.
Yeah.
And then the fundraising for you and your you have to pay your bills. How does that work?
Right. So I think if you talk to, I think that first of all, there's like this sense of, for people that feel called into full-time ministry, at least for me, there was this sense of like, well, doesn't everyone want to go into full-time ministry? And I think over the years, I'm learning like, no, like that is something unique that God puts in someone's heart. But the money factor is something that people are worried about. And a lot of people would say that, hey, I want to go into full-time ministry. Well, if they pay me, I would absolutely do it. And so trying to get through that sense of, okay, what does it look like, first of all, that God is my provider? God is everyone's provider, whether you are getting a check from the bank that you work at, or the school that you work at, or for me, it's from FCA. But the difference is that that's part of my job, is to raise funds. It's almost like if you have someone that's doing development work at a nonprofit, that's their job, to raise money. Well, that just happens to be a lane of my job as well. And the way that I've learned, and through the biblical worldview, as well as FCA training us up well, is I'm not looking for people to give me money. I'm looking for them to partner with me in what God is doing. And ultimately, if I believe God's my provider and God's their provider, they're giving this money back to him. And I just get to be a partner of what he's doing in this. And so that for me has been super helpful, because I'm always looking for partners to pray, to give, to go, to support me. But at the end of the day, I'm not looking for someone just to write me a check. I want them to know what I'm doing. Donna knows I send out newsletters every month of what's going on and how people can be praying, because the reality is I couldn't do what I do unless someone wants to invest in it. Much like if you had a startup that you were doing and you wanted to see an ROI. The reality is my ROI is just people living fuller lives in the name of Jesus.
What's an ROI?
Oh, sorry, your return on investment.
Right.
So like in accounting, you want to see what's the bottom line? What am I getting back of this as an investor? And mine is just a little bit more qualitative than quantitative, you could say. I may not be giving you money back in your bank account, but hopefully it's right, giving you a purpose of investing.
But the model is something that I think all of us should at least stop and think about when we see how much trust a person has to have to step out like that, and it's kind of an inspiration, because trusting God with our time and our money and our will is not so easy. So that was part of your mission that always was like, wow, that's go girl. I don't know.
God has been so faithful. And I think that's, in the word, it says, ask and you will receive. Like there is an element of like where people do just come along and those are the biggest blessings, when you don't have to ask, right? When they say, I see what you're doing. I just want to support you and what God's doing through you. But there is something that breaks off fear that says, I'm going to sit with someone and ask them to partner with me, and challenge them in their resources and in their time, and being okay if they say no, but knowing that God is just asking us to participate in what he's doing.
Right. Well, I think you do it gracefully. That's my take. So as you've, worked with these students and athletes so far in your career, what have you learned specifically? What was different for you that you took home from all of this for yourself? I mean, that surprised you, or that you had to really work to accomplish?
Yeah. I think when a lot of times when you think of FCA ministry, if you've heard of it, it's I want to work with athletes. And FCA has really begun to restructure the power of the coach, like I mentioned earlier. And so that I was nervous. Like I was 23 when I started, and the sense of like these coaches have been coaching, they're Division 1 coaches. Like I was a Division 3 cross country and track athlete. What do I have to offer them? But God just transformed my heart, even of saying, who is encouraging these coaches? If they have so much influence, like I don't need to teach them anything, but I just need to serve them and encourage them. And I had a mentor that once said, coaches are coaching athletes, but who's coaching the coach?
Yeah.
Who's teaching them what to do? And so I think I've realized more than ever just the power of the coach, and also just the humility that I have to exercise to say, I'm not here to teach them anything, but really I'm here to learn and to be a friend and to be a safe place. Because coaching, especially when you are coaching for your job and your well-being, it's a lot of pressure. It's a lot of time, and it's stressful. And so just coming alongside this coach and realizing their influence.
Mm-hmm. Jolee, do you think you'll ever be a coach?
Well, what's funny, I don't know if you knew this, Donna, part of my role at GW was coaching. So I was with the track and cross country team just as a volunteer. And so it was funny, before I came on staff at FCA, I think my dream job would have been to coach collegiately. And so it was a sweet wink from the Lord to, I think, actually step into my dream job and then say, oh yeah, you can do this too as a part of your job. I did coach high school cross country up at Eleanor Roosevelt too for a couple years before I was on staff, and I love it. I love coaching.
Right. Well, it's obvious that you do, and you have this depth of understanding. So I think we'll all just kind of keep our ears open in the future to this very
coaching in Asia. Who knows? Maybe they need some track coaches over there.
Coach. So, putting it all together, you grew up an athlete, you've shared with with our ladies group, we know you've been through some things, you wrote a book, you joined an organization and are really moving out and far. Putting the whole thing together and thinking about this mind, body, spirit, health that we embrace, what take home or what advice would you give that a listener could cherish and maybe follow?
Yeah, I think there's two things that come to mind. And the first thing is just the focus in which we pursue things. And often I think we're very results oriented rather than process oriented. And I'd once heard it said, when God says, well done, good and faithful servant, in the parable of the tablets, like talents, there's a focus on faithfulness, not necessarily fruitfulness. And that's what God asks of us, is to be faithful, not to be fruitful, and to focus on planting and to pruning, but not to get out every day and say, where's my apples? Where's my fruit? But to just water the tree, knowing that if you're being faithful with caring for the roots, then the fruit will come. And so I think from a ministry perspective, from a personal perspective, God has just slowed me down to the point of recognizing that faithfulness is what he desires, and he's in charge of the fruitfulness. And just, it's John 15 of just abiding in the Lord, to be in the vine. You can do nothing apart from me. I have to sit on that and say, okay, don't run ahead, abide. And then I think just alongside of that, and this goes to your question, of just even what is abundant life? Like, how do we experience this is rest. Like, I have been super consistent in taking a day off midweek for the last 3 years, of saying I'm going to only do things that are going to center me in the truest part of who God has made me, and meet with people that are life-giving for me, but ultimately seek to honor him on that day rather than work. Which for me is an act of trust, because I could work all day, every day for 12 hours because I love it.
Right.
But actually setting aside a day, and then it's a biblical principle. God created the world and then he rested, right? But he was first resting, then he created and came back to rest. And so this idea of working from rest rather than working for rest, like I don't want to fall into Sabbath. I want to say, wow, God, thank you for your provision. I'm going to work out of abundance rather than help me, climbing into the weekend.
Right. Oh, that's really wise. Really good advice, Jolee. Really good advice. Well, I think we have reached the end, and I hope everybody else enjoyed it because I certainly did. And like I said before, there will give you the link. It'll take you to the show notes, and we'll have all the information about Jolee's organization and how to contact her, and with email and fundraising and her book. And I'm sure she would be happy to hear from you, as would I. So with that, I think we'll end. Have a great day, Jolee, and
Great.
safe
Thanks,
travel.
Donna. Thanks,
And
everyone.
wish you the very best with all the change that's coming in your life.
Thank you.
Bye.